Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvadikacharyato Tadasata Shri Srimad Vajraya A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantarad Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Samveda Bhaktivinda Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. What happened to the extension cord?
Yeah, it's broken.
It's broken. Oh. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijanatam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All right, so we are currently on Canto 3, Chapter 1, Text 17. Sa nirgata kaurava punya labdo. Sa nirgata kaurava punya labdo. Gajahavayat tirtapada padani. Gajahavayat Gajahvayat tirtapada padani. Gajavayat tirtapada padani. Anvakramat punya chirikshav yorvyam. Anvakramat punya Chikir Anvakramat Punya Chikir Shayorvyam Adishtito Yani Sahasramurti Adhishtito Yani Sahasramurti Sarnirgata Korava Punya Labdo Gajah Vayatirtha Padapadani Anvakramat Punya Chikir Shayorvyam Adishtito Yani Sahasramurti Sanirgata Korava Punya Labdho Gajah Vayatirtha Padapadani Anvakramat Punya Chikir Shayorvyam Adishtito Yani Sahasramurti
Sanirgata Kaurava Punya Labdho
Sanirgata Korava Punya Labdho
Gajahvyatirtha Padapadani
Gajahvayatirtha Padapadani
Anvakramat Punya Chikir Shayorvyam
Anvakramat Punya Chikir Shayorvyam
Adishtito Yani Sahasramurti
Adishtito Yani Sahasramurti Sanirgata Korava Punya Labdho Gajahvayatirtha Padapadani Anvakramat Punya Chikir Shayorvyam Adhishtito Yani Sahasramurti Sanirgata Korava Punya Labdho Gajahvayatirtha Padapadani Anvakramat Punya Chikir Shayorvyam Adhishtito Yani Sahasramurti. Ladies. Sanirgata Kaurava Punya Labdho Gajahvayatirtha Padapadani Anvakramat Punya Chikir Shayorvyam Adhishtito Yani Sahasramurti Sanirgata Kaurava Punya Labdho Gajahvayatirtha Padapadani Anvakramat Punya Chikir Shayorvyam Adhishtito Yani Sahasramurti Saham He Vidura Nirgatam after having quit Kaurava the Kuru dynasty Punya piety Labdha so achieved Gaja Ahvayat from Hastinapur Tirthapada of the Supreme Lord Padani pilgrimages Anvakramat took shelter Punya piety Chikirshaya desiring so Urvyam of high grade. Adishtita situated. Yani all those. Sahasra thousands. Murtihi forms. So the translation reads, by his piety, Vidura achieved the advantages of the pious Kauravas. After leaving Hastinapur, he took shelter of many places of pilgrimages, which are the Lord's lotus feet. With a desire to gain a high order of pious life, he traveled to holy places where thousands of transcendental forms of the Lord are situated. So I say, and you all please repeat, by his piety, Vidura achieved the advantages of the pious Kauravas. After leaving Hastinapur, he took shelter of many places of pilgrimages, which are the Lord's lotus feet. With a desire to gain a high order of pious life, he traveled to holy places where thousands of transcendental forms of the Lord are situated. So here's the purport. Vidura was undoubtedly a highly elevated and pious soul. Otherwise, he would not have taken his birth in the Kaurava family. To have high parentage, to possess wealth, to be highly learned, to have great personal beauty are all due to past pious acts. But such pious possessions are not sufficient for obtaining the grace of the Lord and being engaged in his transcendental loving service. Vidura considered himself less pious, and therefore he decided to travel to all the great places of pilgrimage in the world in order to achieve greater piety and advance nearer to the Lord. At that time, Lord Krishna was personally present in the world, and Vidura could have at once approached him directly, but he did not do so because he was not sufficiently freed from sin. One cannot be 100% devoted to the Lord unless and until he completely is free from the effects of all sin. Vidura was conscious that by the association of the diplomatic Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, he had lost his piety and was therefore not fit to associate at once with the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita 7.28, this is confirmed in the following verse. Yesham antagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dhanva moha nirmukta bhajante mam dridha vrataha. Persons who are sinful, asuras like Kamsa and Jarasan, cannot think of the Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the absolute truth. Only those who are pure devotees, those who follow the regulative principles of religious life as prescribed in scriptures, are able to engage themselves in karma yoga and then jnana yoga, and thereafter by pure meditation, can understand pure consciousness. When God consciousness is developed, one can take advantage of the association of pure devotees. Syan mahat sevaya vipra punya tirtha niveshanat. One is able to associate with the Lord even during the existence of this life. Places of pilgrimage are meant for eradicating the sins of the pilgrims, and they are distributed all over the universe just to give facility to all concerned for attaining pure existence and God realization. One should not be satisfied, however, merely visiting places of pilgrimage and performing one's prescribed duties. He should be eager to meet the great souls who are already there, engaged in the service of the Lord. In each and every place of pilgrimage, the Lord is present. in his various transcendental forms. These forms are called archa murtis, or forms of the Lord, which can be easily appreciated by the common man. The Lord is transcendental to our mundane senses. He cannot be seen with our present eyes, nor can he be heard with our present ears. To the degree that we have entered into the service of the Lord, or to the proportion to which our lives are freed from sins, we can perceive the Lord. But even though we are not free from sins, the Lord is kind enough to allow us the facility of seeing him in his archa murtis in the temple. The Lord is all-powerful, and therefore he is able to accept our service by presentation of his archa form. No one, therefore, should foolishly think the archa in the temple to be an idol. Such an archa murti is not an idol, but the Lord himself. And to the proportion to which one is freed from sins, he is able to know the significance of the archa murti. The guidance of a pure devotee is therefore always required. In the land of Varsha, there are many hundreds and thousands of places of pilgrimage distributed all over the country. And by the traditional practice, the common man visits such holy places during all seasons of the year. Some of the archa representations of the Lord situated in different places of pilgrimage are mentioned herewith. The Lord is present at Mathura, the birthplace of Lord Krishna, as Adikeshava. The Lord is present at Mathura, the birthplace of Lord Krishna, as Adikeshava. The Lord is present at Puri, or Orissa, as Lord Jagannath, known as Purushottama. He is present at Allahabad, Prayag, as Bindu Madhava. At Mandara Hill, he is present as Madhusudan. In the Anandaranya, he is known as Vasudeva. Padmanabha and Janardana. At Vishnu Kanchi, he is known as Vishnu. And at Mayapur, he is known as Hari. There are millions and billions of such archa forms of the Lord distributed all over the universe. All these archa murtis are summarized in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the following words: Sarvatra prakasha tandra bhakti sukhadite jagatera adharma nashi dharma stapite. The Lord has so distributed himself all over the universe just to give pleasure to the devotees and to give the common man facility to eradicate his sins and to establish religious principles all over the world. Sanirgata Kaurava Punyalabdo Gajavayatirtha Pada Padani Anvakramat Punya Chikirsayorvyam Adishtito Yani Sahasramurti. By his piety, Vidura achieved the advantages of the pious Kauravas. After leaving Hastinapur, he took shelter of many places of pilgrimages, which are the Lord's lotus feet. With a desire to gain a high order of pious life, he traveled to the holy places where thousands of transcendental forms of the Lord are situated. So this section of Bhagavatam, we are discussing this, the life of Vidura, particularly because Vidura is a very wonderful devotee. It's interesting that in this purport, Prabhupada explains that Vidura did not approach Krishna directly because he felt contaminated by his association in the court of Hastinapur with Duryodhana and his father Dhritarashtra. Of course, Vidura was there really for their sake, And he certainly was nothing like them. It's interesting too, because I usually think of Vidura as being, someone who's quite advanced in spiritual life. As we see, he was born into the Kauravas. He was associated with the Pandavas. He had association with Krishna. So that's pretty high. But here it's mentioned that he felt unqualified to approach Krishna directly, and instead he chose to go on pilgrimage. And he visited many, many holy places. And he was gone for a long period of time, many years. The episode that caused him to leave the court of Hastinapur was when he tried to give Dhritarashtra good counsel that his son Duryodhana was offense personified. And Duryodhana was completely positioned against the idea of giving any land back to the Pandavas, although it was actually their land. So when Duryodhana heard Vidura giving this instruction to his father Dhritarashtra, he became so enraged that he, as we heard in the previous verse, the one just before this one, that actually a couple of verses there, he says, "Who asked him to come here, this son of a kept mistress? He is so crooked that he spies in the interest of the enemy against those on whose support he has grown up. Toss him out of the palace immediately and leave him only with his breath." So this very offensive statement made by Duryodhana was not painful in and of itself to Vidura, but Vidura could understand that his time in the palace of Hastinapur had drawn to a close. He could understand that he'd given his best instruction to Dhritarashtra, and Dhritarashtra was going to accept it or not, and it looked like or not. And he thought, what's the point in staying here any longer? Duryodhana's not going to accept me. Dhritarashtra is also blind. He's not going to accept good instruction. So I might as well leave, and this is a good opportunity. So instead of being caught up or being attached to the surroundings, which were certainly opulent, Vidura left. And Vidura then traveled on pilgrimage, and he did not participate in the Battle of Kurukshetra. He knew that because of the way things were stacked up, that he would that the Battle of Kurukshetra would be fought, but he was not there for that. Similar to Lord Balaram, who also could not bear to fight in the Battle of Kurukshetra because he was brother to Krishna, so he couldn't fight against his own brother. And he was friends with Duryodhana, so he didn't want to fight against Duryodhana either. So he left and also went on pilgrimage. And of course, one of the main themes here is that places of pilgrimage are places where people can come to get rid of their sinful activities. We were just giving class 2 days ago in the Bhakti Center on the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And there they were discussing how the King Bhagirath brought the Ganga to the earth. And the Ganga was afraid to come to the earth because she thought, if I'm so powerful, my waters, I will bore a hole into the earth, if I fall from the heavenly planets. And secondly, what will happen to me when all kinds of contaminated people come and bathe in me, and I have to accept all their sins. So, of course, King Bhagirath arranged for Lord Shiva to capture the Ganga on his head so she would not destroy the earth as she fell from the heavenly worlds. And he arranged that saintly people would also bathe in the Ganga. And as contaminated, sinful people bathe in the Ganga and give up their sinful acts and their reactions into the Ganga is purified by the fact that saintly people subsequently bathe in the Ganga, and they take away the sins that the contaminated people. So that is why we sometimes hear devotees referred to as tirthas, because actually they are the saintly places and the saintly rivers, because they're the ones who have the potency to deliver. And that's why someone who comes to a sacred place only with the idea of taking a bath is considered like an ass or a cow. Yes, yatma buddhi kunape tridantake taddi. What is it? Yes, yatma buddhi kunape tridantake twadi kala tradishu boma ijadi yatirtha buddhi shalile na karhe chij janesha bigesha sa eva gokara. So that verse is saying that people who only come to sacred places to take bath, or think of the deity as an idol, or their place of land as worshipable, or their wife as their property, such people are no better than an ass or a cow. So actually one should go to a holy place to take shelter and get association from great saintly persons. Because if we get shelter from great saintly persons, we will certainly hear about the real goal of life, which is not to accumulate pious activities, as sometimes people do. Sometimes people are simply trying to accumulate pious activities, and by accumulating pious activities, they hope to enjoy in this world or to ascend to the heavenly worlds. And there is no real benefit in enjoying nicely in the material world as a result of one's pious action. And there is certainly no real benefit in going to the heavenly worlds, because one cannot remain there. One will eventually exhaust his pious activities and fall again to the earth plane, and again live a life of miseries on the earth plane. So an intelligent person does not see this as anything worth achieving. And Vidura, he did actually get the mercy of great devotees. So we know, it's interesting, Vidura has a long history. There's a lot of stuff on him in the Vedic literatures. You know, he was, of course, seen as a plenary portion of Dharmaraj, or one time was visited by Mandavya Rishi. Mandavya Rishi had been impaled on a spear. There was a story where some dacoits came, and they were being pursued by the constables of the king, and these dacoits hid their treasure near where Mandavya's ashram was. And Mandavya had taken a vow of silence, so when he was questioned by the constables of the king, he did not explain what the situation was. So they naturally came to the conclusion that he was in some way affiliated with the dacoits that had stolen the property. So the dacoits were put to death by being impaled on spears, and Mandavya Rishi was also placed on a spear. However, because he was a great rishi, he didn't die like they did. And while he was on the spear, other great sages in the form of birds came and were circling around Mandavya. And they asked Mandavya, Mandavya, why have you had this bad karma happen to you? What is the sin you have created? And Mandavya said, I'm not sure, but there must be some reason why I'm suffering, because everything happens for a purpose in this world. Eventually, the king heard from his servants that this Mandavya didn't die. And so he went to visit Mandavya, and he thought, this man is a sage, and obviously he's not dying as his punishment, so I must have made a mistake. So he begged forgiveness from Mandavya, and he tried to pull the spear out of Mandavya's body, but it broke off in his body. And from that point, he was known as Ani Mandavya, which means Mandavya who had a spear point in his body. And one day, Mandavya went to the heavenly, actually to Yamalok, and he asked Yamaraj, you know, I always wondered why it was that I was impaled on this spear. And so now that I'm face to face with you, Yamaraj, please account to me why I was impaled on the spear. And Yamaraj said, well, as a child, you impaled some insects on a piece of grass. And on hearing this, Mandavya became incensed. And he said, what? I was just a child. And, you know, on top of it, I've done so many pious things. Couldn't that have counteracted for it? I think you don't know what you're doing. And he said, therefore, I curse you, Yamaraj, that you yourself will have to take birth on earth as the son of a Shudrani. So he cursed Yamaraj. And he said, you know, henceforward, no one should ever be culpable for any action they make under the age of 12. You know, that previous to this time, one is not really aware of what is right or what is wrong, so someone can't be held accountable for something that happens when they're that young. So this birth, of course, was when the queens of Kashi couldn't bear union with Vyasadeva a second time. So they sent one of their maidservants, who actually was the one who coupled with Veda Vyas. And therefore, the third child, the first one, of course, was Pandu, the second one was Dhritarashtra. Actually, the first was Dhritarashtra, the second was Pandu. And the third then was Vidura. And Vidura was not actually considered royalty because he was not born from one of the queens, but from one of their maidservants. However, as Prabhupada puts, he was given all the benedictions and facilities of a royal prince. Of course, as we hear, he tried to help the Pandavas. He gave Yudhishthira clever instructions in a Malecha language that they were being taken to a place where they were going to be burned, you know, in the house of Lak, you know, in Varnavata. He gave them this instruction. He sent a person who was an excavator who built a tunnel for them to escape. And later, of course, as we find out, Vidura was always their well-wisher, and he tried to advocate for Dhritarashtra to give up his plan and force his son Duryodhana to accept that the Pandavas should be given some land. Of course, when this didn't happen and he left, he went on pilgrimage. And when he went on pilgrimage, he came across Uddhava. Uddhava had understood that he wanted to see Krishna. He was given the task of going to the sacred place, Badarik Ashram, but he couldn't bear to be without Krishna, so he wanted to meet Krishna, and he met Krishna right after Krishna had had his foot struck by the arrow by the hunter Jara. So Krishna was preparing to leave his body, and Krishna and Uddhava had wonderful talks, and while they were talking, that's when Maitreya also came onto the scene and was part of this discussion between Krishna and Uddhava. And later, Uddhava left and Maitreya left, and then Krishna did leave his body. This was, of course, after the entire Yadu dynasty was also annihilated. And Vidura came across Uddhava, and Vidura spoke with Uddhava. There was some interaction there, and then that's when Uddhava felt it was not proper for him to instruct Vidura, so instead he sent Vidura to be instructed by Maitreya, which ultimately Vidura would do. He would take instruction from Maitreya. And then, you know, some years after the Battle of Kurukshetra was over, after all of Duryodhana's brothers were killed and Duryodhana was killed, after you know, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari lived with the Pandavas for some years. Vidura came back, and we heard about that in first canto, that Vidura came back. And the Pandavas were so happy to see Vidura. But Vidura really wasn't there to see them. That wasn't his ultimate goal. His ultimate goal was to preach to Dhritarashtra one more time to see if he could get Dhritarashtra to quit the palace and not live like a family dog at the hands of the Pandavas, who he himself had partially conspired to kill. So he was spoken to by Vidura, and Vidura said unpleasant things to Dhritarashtra, and it was where he gives this analogy that you're living like a dog, you know. You are being fed by the Pandavas, and you tried to kill them. And you're an old man. Are you going to just live your whole life out like this? This is ridiculous. And Dhritarashtra got it. It got through to him. And in the middle of the night, he leaves the palace at Hastinapur, and Yudhisthira is pained, and at the same time, also, Vidura and Gandhari leave. And I believe Kunti also left, you know. So they all departed, and they went on to a hermitage where they would perform austerities. And eventually, of course, Dhritarashtra would give up his body by causing fire element within his body to burn his body away. And his wife, Gandhari, would enter into the fire. And around this same time, Vidura also would quit his body. And he would fast and put a stone in his mouth. And as Yudhisthira and the Pandavas finally figured out where they were and they came to visit them, Yudhisthira tried to offer his obeisances or homage to Vidura, but Vidura didn't make a sound, you know. So Yudhisthira said, "My dear Vidura, just see that Yudhisthira is trying to offer you obeisances. Have you nothing to say?" And at that point, Vidura's body fell down, and in one account it says that his soul entered into the body of Yudhisthira, because they were both parts of Dharmaraj or Yamaraj, you know. So Yudhisthira is the son of Yamaraj, and Vidura was also an expansion of Yamaraj who had to undergo this curse. So we're learning about this, and we're learning about this in respect that places of pilgrimage have great saintly people living there. And great saintly people live in places of pilgrimage for the benefit of others. And along with great saintly people are the Archa Murti, the deity forms. These Archa Murti are a way that contaminated people can actually become purified and learn about the Supreme Lord. And of course, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in Adi Lila, we learn that when the Supreme Lord comes, he comes for two purposes. One is internal and one is external. His external purpose is to deliver the fallen. So he comes to deliver the fallen people of this world, to try to show a little bit of his pastimes so they might be attracted and decide to leave this miserable material world behind. So in this way, the Supreme Lord comes for a salvific purpose, but also he comes for his own purpose, which is the internal reasons. He comes for his own pastimes. So when a person goes to a sacred place, or he sees the Archa Murti, if he has a little bit of faith, he can become purified. He can hear from the saintly persons about devotional service, the process of engaging in devotional service, and in that way perfect his life. At the same time, he will gain a little faith that this deity is not some metal or stone or paper mache or wood or something like that, but actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, non-different. And this is the beginning of the living entity's reawakening to his relationship with the Supreme Lord. So the Supreme Lord is there, and the form of the Lord may appear to be metal, wood, stone, paper mache, or sometimes even cow dung. This may appear to be so, but actually it is the Supreme Lord. And to the degree one is free from sin, one can witness that and actually appreciate that. So through the process of devotional service, we are being purged of the sin, which will eventually allow us to have real darshan with the Archa Murti, which is non-different from the actual Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, long purport, a lot of stuff to go through. And I was just trying to review this whole, history of Vidura so that I could put it in my own mind to see how it fits into this chapter. So, any questions or comments from anyone? Yes?
Mentioning how Vidura, ended up not fighting in the battle, and also Balaram didn't fight because he was friends with Duryodhana. And I was just wondering, it just doesn't make sense. How could, I know he was his guru and everything, but, why would Balaram be friends or guru or help Duryodhana, the demon?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think about that a lot. I think that one thing that this shows is that God never abandons anyone, even people who are seriously mischief makers, that in this way Balaram could see something even in Duryodhana. And this I think is kind of a glorious thing about the Supreme. Krishna, of course, had no truck with with Duryodhana, and he could understand what Duryodhana was up to. And Krishna couldn't countenance Duryodhana because of his hatred for the Pandavas. Whereas Balaram on the other side of the coin, Duryodhana obviously had his own process to go through, and eventually would become purified too. So that's one of the things that I think about when I hear about this fact that Balaram was friendly with Duryodhana. So, and this also shows that Duryodhana appreciated God. He couldn't appreciate him as Krishna, but he could appreciate him as Balaram. So he wasn't completely out in the cold either. Yeah, you had a question back there, Brajamohan. I'm having a really difficult time understanding you.
So like Vrindavan one gets certain benefit, from living there like 1,000 times the benefit of doing service.
Uh-huh.
And then you have to understand also that anywhere there is a temple of Krishna, it's also considered like a manifestation of the Dham or an expansion of the Dham. So, but then I was thinking, just one thing I was thinking, is it like in Nectar of Instruction it says that Vaikuntha is the biggest and then better than
Yeah.
kind of like that, like pure, more pure,
More pure.
I wanted to share something.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking about this even from the perspective of, Vidura. You think of Vidura as being very pure, but then here we hear that, so there's pure, more pure, and this, it's kind of like, I was thinking that apparently there are different sizes of infinity. At least according to modern mathematics, that there was a mathematician, Georg Cantor, who discovered the idea that apparently infinity comes in different sizes. There's different types of infinities, which he proved by, some explanation that the natural numbers are infinite, but the real numbers are greater than the natural numbers. And he made some proof, And so in the same way, we hear that there's perfect, more perfect, and most perfect, whereas generally in the English language, there's no such thing as more perfect or most perfect. But it's just interesting how it just goes on forever, and you can, whatever you understand, you can understand something more, and there's a whole thing of the, the Bhagavatamrita, where Gopakumar learns, from each devotee that actually this devotee says, oh, I'm not a very good devotee. Over there's that person is a great devotee. Then Gopakumar goes to visit that devotee, and that devotee says, no, I'm not really a great devotee. Actually, who's a great devotee is over there. And so he kind of travels all over, from the earth to the heavenly worlds, to Vaikuntha, to Goloka Vrindavan. And in this way we see that it's all wonderful in various ways. And there are different magnitudes of infinity, or something like that, That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, Hari.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the class. As along the same lines as Brajmohan Prabhu, we hear these statements from Srila Prabhupada. I recall too when you were speaking that bathing in Haridwar is in the Ganga is the same as bathing in the Ganga in Kolkata. And then Srila Prabhupada says also that in terms of Krishna, that the Kurukshetra is a much more important place and holier place for the devotees than Mathura, because Krishna's actions were in Kurukshetra while his birthplace was in Mathura. So the this Tirtha Buddhi Sarira Karvisage.
Yeah.
Is it that these places have inherent spiritual power or energies, or is it that it's powerful because the sadhus have decided to congregate in that place?
Well, I think both, but you know, in general, we see the two things are kind of like two sides of the same coin. Why are places holy? Because the sadhus come there, you know. And why do the sadhus go to a particular place? Because it's holy. So it kind of works both ways, you know, that. And actually, as that verse is saying, you know, that one should not just go to a holy place just to take bath or to gain piety. One should go there really to associate with the great saintly persons, because the saintly persons like Vidura will cut, sadhu is like a knife. They cut the material misconceptions. And by the misconceptions being cut, one wakes up to realize, hey, I'm wasting my life in the material world. That I may be trying to enjoy with wife, friend, family relations, and children, relatives, and so many other things, but I'm just wasting my life. I should actually make a solution and get out of the cycle of birth and death. So that's actually the reason why one goes there. But those who are not, you know, grade A students, they might go there and just get some pious activity, or, you know, at least they get some of their sins absorbed away, and they make some chance of hearing something about the Supreme, you know. So, at any rate, that's the interesting, and Prabhupada said that India is wonderful that way because there's so many places where one can go to associate with the Supreme Lord or his associates, or some story, or someone who is a great devotee or something lived there, and in this way one makes a lot of progress. So you had a question too, Mukunda. Oh, okay. So, at any rate, yes. Was that yes? So breakfast is very auspicious too.
Ask questions.
And, right. Thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to